Welcome to another episode of Hiring and Empowering Solutions podcast. My name is Molly McGrath, and I am the founder and creator of this revolutionary office altering podcast. We're going to just hit it today. And today's guest, we have Rebecca Kitson with us. Hi, Rebecca. Thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you, Molly. It's really my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited about today's conversation, especially during this very vulnerable time that we have. And we scheduled this conversation before kind of the economy went topsy-turvy, so to speak, and we've had all this virus and illness. And today we're going to be speaking about debunking the small town myths of building a successful law practice and competing with big firm. And I think this conversation is it is so relevant now more than ever for multiple reasons. When we do hit some kind of financial crisis, so to speak, which is always cyclical, number one. Number two, also with this noise out there of social media and big firms having big marketing budgets and things of that nature. And then number three, many of our listeners, you're an immigration attorney in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And if our listeners have never been to New Mexico, Albuquerque is a bigger town, but I'm excited for you to share some of the things of what you've done, because so often I hear from people, well, you don't understand my marketplace. I live in a small town, our demographics, they have all these reasons and justification in regards to why X, Y, or Z doesn't work in their firm because they're in a small town, and already coming with this limiting belief or mindset that they're defeated before they even start. And I would love for you to share with us what's worked for you and how you've kind of managed your mindset around all that.
So well, thanks. I think part of it, New Mexico, of course, is a very unique environment as well. We have, a couple million people in the whole state. And while Albuquerque is the largest urban center in the state, we have a huge geographic area, and it's a very limited community in terms of size as well as access. And we have one law school in the entire state as well. So everybody funnels through the same process if you've gone to school here, and then you move into practice. So it's a limited kind of social network. We all swim in the same pool. So when I was in law school, it's interesting that when you're brand new in law school, at University of New Mexico, they tell you that your career starts today on your first day of law school, because they say, look around the room. These are going to be the people that you're practicing with for the term of your career if you choose to practice in the state of New Mexico. So the interesting thing is that you really have limited choices as far as where you're going to work when you graduate, depending on what area you want to go into. For me, I knew I wanted to go into immigration law. It was my passion and my reason for going to law school. So I had a choice of literally a couple of firms that I could go and work for in order to get the experience that I needed. I did choose one and, worked diligently at that firm, got started. It was more of a traditional firm in the sense that it had, one owner attorney and some support staff. There aren't huge firms in the state of New Mexico in niche areas like immigration. So, again, it was either that firm or another firm in town. So I dug in and I learned what I could. Part of the challenge was that there's, it was myself and the owner of the firm. And so he was basically in charge of all decisions relating to my career and my life. And the only other choice would be to jump ship to, if I wanted to leave that firm, would be to jump ship to a similar firm, basically out of the frying pan and into the fire, or to start off on my own. And it took me 6 years of being an associate attorney and really feeling like I was stuck within the systems and the processes and the model that I was working in before I just felt that I had to jump and leave and start my own practice at that point.
And, what is so inspiring for me, it's not like it was just you, that you were a young attorney, you didn't have a family, what have you. Talk to us a little bit about, it was making a courageous leap of faith, but you also had many other commitments that on your personal side as well, which probably was fuel for your fire to succeed, right?
Absolutely. I had wanted to be a parent, and when I found out that I was pregnant, it was even more of an inspiration for me to leap out of that practice. I couldn't visualize myself being pregnant where I worked because the hours were so demanding. It was really kind of out of relation to the amount of time I was putting in versus what I was making and all of that. It was kind of that classic situation where you're just really a producer in a firm and you don't have a lot of wiggle room or choice involved. And so when I did find out I was pregnant, it was even more of a push for me to quit and start my own practice. It's a little bit of a crazy choice, given that I was about 4 months pregnant when I opened up my doors. And I knew, of course, that the inevitable was coming down the pipe, that I was going to give birth at some point and have to manage leave on my own. But, it still was by far the best choice that I could have made.
So you made the decision and you knew, all right, I'm opening my doors, but probably about 5 months from now, I'm going to be taking a break, so to speak. So can you share with us some of the tips and techniques that you adopted for, number one, not walking in defeated already, worrying about competing with the competition, even though there wasn't a tremendous amount of it in your marketplace, there still was some, and trying to get in front of clients, and what you did to generate clients in the beginning and get your message and your branding out there?
Yeah, I think that, as part of making that leap of faith, it really required a lot of soul searching. And I remembered why I had gone into immigration law in the first place. Over 6 years of really focusing on the productive work side of things, I think I had lost some of the spirit of why I want to practice immigration law. It's a very challenging area, and you have to at least get used to losing some of the time. And so it can be very defeating and very challenging. You're sort of Samson and Goliath kind of feeling anyway. And so really going back to those roots of like, I love my clients. I believe strongly in their cases. And so just really, going back to that spirit and knowing myself that by doing good for people and by supporting the communities that I care about so much is really the way forward. And if you continue to go back to that center reason, that choices from there should flow from that place. And so for myself, I knew that, it was going to be a challenge. So what I decided to do was to take the high road with things. So I made sure that I was in the proper place ethically. And I knew that my clients needed to be notified that I was leaving. I wasn't entirely confident that the firm that I was leaving would notify them properly. So I did take that upon myself and checked with my local disciplinary board to make sure I was doing things properly. Notified all of my clients. In immigration law, a lot of times we work with flat fees. I think it's increasingly common in different areas of practice, but definitely within immigration law it is. And so I made a choice that with any clients that came over to me, that I would accept their flat fee amount of whatever they were given from the prior firm, so that they wouldn't be financially harmed by following with me. And while the prior firm that I was at chose to give smaller refunds to people, just given the impact of me leaving, the clients were aware of the fact that I was taking cases for much less than I normally would. So it really created a groundswell of goodwill within the clients that chose to follow. The other thing that I did was to reach back into the communities through nonprofit organizations, to really attend the legal fairs, invest in efforts to support the local nonprofits working with the immigrant communities, and, just get access to the people that I wanted to represent across the board, and creating as well goodwill within the communities that supported immigrants to create additional sources of referrals.
I love that, the groundswell of goodwill. So, what I'm hearing from you is anchoring back into your passion of why you got into the area of law that you got into, number one. Number two, taking the messaging into your own hands, whether you're leaving a firm or you're hanging your shingle for the first time, but putting that, and I like the word that you said, your kind of your spirit and your heart of gold of anchored to your mission and your passion, and controlling the messaging that you're putting out there to differentiate yourself. And then the third thing I hear is the community outreach, and get in connection with the people, like visualizing the people that you want to work with and getting out there in a community outreach perspective, and getting out and shaking hands and communicating and sharing with them from a place of service and over communication.
Absolutely. I think that, within smaller communities, it's really, word of mouth is really important. I think it's a much, much more powerful tool than any other form of marketing. And so it can take two different forms. And I think our marketing strategy at my firm has always taken, two different routes. One is, that directly accessing the communities that you want to represent. Word of mouth is powerful, representing people well, having them refer family members to you is really helpful, especially with immigrants come in families. That's really who we don't represent individuals. They tend to be families, all multi-generational, but also within, the larger legal community, I also do a lot of presentations. I provide a lot of information, really try and get out there, not only within, bar associations and legal groups, but also within the business community and just across the, community in any way to be able to provide information about the topic that I love, because other professionals are great referral sources for cases, especially if they identify you as the person that does X. For me, it's immigration law.
So presentations and speaking and educate to motivate. I agree with you. I've seen some people that are speaking about, referral marketing doesn't work anymore. You have to build all these Facebook ads and retail and digital, which yes, there's a place for that as well. But I fully agree with you. The most successful firms that I know, you're in the personal service business. You're helping people that have it's emotionally charged area, regardless of what area of law you're operating in. You're in the business of relationships. You're in the business of calming people down, regardless of what they're up against. And presentations and connecting with power partners is absolutely the most effective way. And so can you share with us a little bit about how you were able to connect with power partners and get some speaking opportunities? I know that's always on people's bucket list or marketing plans when I see that, getting out there and speaking more. And what, if you can remember, what you did to be able to secure some of those opportunities?
I think it goes back to the same type of perspective, is that if you're volunteering, if you're offering your time, which is, as attorneys, it's one of the greatest things that we have to give, especially if you're starting up, being seen as for myself as the kind of person that really is committed to the cause of supporting immigrants. So, for me, I was on multiple different boards. I offered to support and help. If that means, taking on cases for somebody or offering to provide support. The more that you're involved, the more people that you know, the more possibility that you'll have to be offered to do something like speak. If you're on for us, like the immigration section of the New Mexico State Bar, getting to know other immigration practitioners, and really just getting to know people in person, whatever networking opportunities there are. I think it grows on itself. You hear about one thing, you hear about something else. I was lucky enough to get invited to start teaching at the law school a couple of years after I graduated. So that was something I was already doing when I started my own firm. And there's been endless opportunities through the law school to connect with the professional community and just to find out what's going on in other areas. So again, through giving, it's what you give away. I think a lot of times comes back in greater amounts. You just have to be willing to trust the process. And it's not as easy as being able to say, okay, I'm going to invest X number of dollars in, whatever type of marketing. And then you can see your return on investment in a numerical capacity. Some things, including human beings, work in a more qualitative way. And there just needs to be a trust of the process.
Wow. Trust the process. So often you'll hear from people, don't do anything unless you have an ROI or KPI or what have you. And as you're sitting here and you talk about giving, it brings me back to a book that I think it was Bob Berg that was really popular in the early 2000s called The Go-Giver. Did you ever read that?
I have not. I will put it on the list.
Yeah, it's all about exactly what you're saying. I'm like, wow, is she quoting that book? Because it's the exact mindset, and especially so. I'm sitting here thinking, and you and I talked about this a little bit before we recorded today. This time that it's such an amazing opportunity right now for us to really get back to. And I think that a lot of this with the coronavirus and things of that nature, it's bringing us back to basics and it's bringing us back to the roots. So if you are a new attorney hanging your shingle, or maybe you're a successful attorney where business is starting, you're either experiencing a seasonal slowdown depending on where you're at, or if you are experiencing a slowdown because of the economy, whatever it might be, it's an opportunity for you, I think, to remember the biggest use of your time. And I love that volunteering and offering your time is what I heard you say, is going back to that and making certain that you are showing up authentically and very much profoundly and from a place of service, and just trust the process, because you will never, ever, ever, ever lose when you're showing up and you're volunteering your time and you're speaking and you are creating value. That will go a long way. And I love that you just even said that, from trust the process, because that's exactly it. When I have attorneys that have blank calendars, or they have more time available, or maybe they have limited time available, that's when you need to stop and pause and realign and go back to your why, go back to your passion of why you're doing what you're doing. And I think that is the greatest way to compete with other firms, whether they're big firms, small firms, whatever it might be in your marketplace. Over the weekend, I was in a marketing summit virtually online. And one of the things that they said last night is that showing up the phone and connecting with people will make you rich. You will always, always win when you're not hiding out behind technology and you're showing up in your community. You have boots on the ground and you are picking up the phone, or you're walking in and volunteering or showing up at events or giving presentations, especially if you're really connected like you are, Rebecca, to your why and your passion, and you're leading from a place of why you're doing what you're doing and how you can be of service.
And I think it's the way to feeling, profoundly appreciative and grateful for what you're able to do too. Because if we don't love what we're doing, why are we doing it? And, it does shine through. It goes against all of the sort of caricatures of attorneys that we see. I know that when, especially a few years after graduating from law school, sometimes I would go out to a networking event or happy hour or something, and I'd be talking to some of the people I graduated with, and I would ask them what they were doing, and they were already like, they didn't want to talk about it. You could tell that they weren't satisfied. And I'm like, I think that the idea that attorneys hoard their time, or that they sort of despise what they do every day, no wonder somebody wouldn't want to entrust you with their money or their life, or, the most important aspects of what's happening for them. Knowing it really does create a trust and a draw. It's very attractive to people when you love what you do and you own it and you're willing to be authentic about it, as you said, because it's the best marketing that there is, because it goes contrary to what people expect. And people tell me all the time, you don't seem like a lawyer at all. And I'm like, all right, this is a good thing.
Yeah, I said that when we first met and we first spoke, and I said to you, your website communicates so much of how you are about impact and service. Just even pulling up your website. And I love what you said about attorneys hoarding their time and being unhappy and not passionate about, they don't even want to talk about what they do. I've witnessed that as well. And we have a hiring side of our business as well. And I'm amazed at how many candidates, they'll go to the attorney's website or they'll go in for the interview and they'll come out and they'll say, I don't know, there's just something. I have one attorney who, their pictures are very stale, very stagnant on their website. And people will pull up and look at the attorney and say, no, they look mean. They look really unhappy. They look like a traditional attorney that I worked for way back when. And they were so completely miserable. In this day and age, people don't want to work with that. They don't want to hire that. They are about, where do I feel like somebody has my back? Where do I feel safe, connected? I feel acknowledged. I feel heard. And the person really can resonate with what I'm going through. And people are hiring, and even more so now than ever, they're hiring where they feel connected and they feel like you're a human being, not an attorney.
Absolutely. And I think that, that goes, like you said, being really connected to why you do what you do and what you love about it. Even I hired an attorney recently to assist with my mother, who's getting elderly. And it was interesting was that even for a very different area of law, he was really very personable and very much in love with what he did. And it was the reason that we ultimately chose him, is that I felt great resonance with him as a kindred spirit, in that you could tell that he took his time, wanted to find out about, who we were as a family, what our needs were. And I think that's really important. And part of the hiring is, being able to express to the people who want to work there who you are and what it's like to be there, and get them to be inspired as part of your team. We do have, a lot of the folks that work at my firm are coming up. They're millennials. They're from, different areas with different expectations. And I like to meet them where they're at. Being able to really be supportive of your team is the most important thing, because then they reflect back your why to the clients and the way that they interface with the firm.
Meet them where they're at. That's fantastic. That's great. So what I'm hearing from you is really, I love this, not hoarding your time, and your time is your greatest resource that you have, in offering your time, whether it's yourself, your team. If you have a community outreach coordinator, I just got off a coaching call with a firm where they just hired a community outreach coordinator, and she started today. And all she was talking about was giving and service. And especially in this time right now, they do estate planning and elder law, and families can't go to nursing homes. They can't go see their family. And she just had no shortage of ideas of how we can support the caretakers and support the nursing homes with fielding calls for them and things of that nature. Service, service, service. So if you have a story of, I'm so busy and I don't have enough time, what I'm taking away from this, Rebecca, is you really have to take a giant step back and pause and look at where you might be hoarding your time, and where you, even especially when you're busy, where you want to start giving back your time and volunteering and offering that up and making certain that you have a community side of it. And what's popping up for me is, if you don't naturally want to do that, then you might not be doing something that you love. right? It might just be about the KPIs and the ROI and the investment. Trust the process. I love that. Anchoring back to that. If you aren't inclined to give back, you're not inclined to be giving, you're not inclined to be of service. One thing that I'm taking out of this, if you don't have that groundswell of goodwill, you might just be in your area of law just for the paycheck or just for the money or just running it like a business versus a service business.
Absolutely. And I think you can carry through the same idea of that and try to volunteer in some other areas of law. It's you might find yourself surprised at the areas that you're drawn to, and being able to really be re-inspired to try something different. The beauty of being an attorney, and part of the privilege and the joy of it, is that there's great flexibility, and you have the an opportunity to shift possibly to something else. And even if you don't shift your area of law, you may still end up creating goodwill just for the person that you are, and bring great satisfaction to yourself. About this time last year, I went and volunteered in the Rio Grande Valley with Probar, which is part of the ABA's Asylum Project, and in helping screen detained kids in the valley there. They have a lot of detained immigrant children. And some of the attorneys that I volunteered with were working in a more traditional corporate environment from different states, and their firms had sent them there. And it was, of course, hugely inspiring for them as well. There were some of us diehard immigration attorneys there. And, it just goes to show that even if they're going to go back and practice the area of law that they've chosen, they're doing so with a very different perspective on the world. And they're able to really give back. And I think it can open up your mind to different volunteer opportunities. Volunteering is kind of addicting, I think. It's, once you get the feeling of really being able to give back, it's good for mind, body, and soul.
Yeah. And like you said, it brings a different perspective that you could bring back to even your quote unquote corporate law job or whatever it might be, and being able to bring that connection and authenticity and that service mindset back to that can even just help you realign and re-anchor and have a new appreciation. It doesn't mean that you have to jump ship and find a different area of law. You could have a new perspective on it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So
go ahead.
So I'm hearing definitely just get out there and trust the process. If you don't have any money and you don't have a whole slew of clients and your phone ringing off the hook, just being out there and being front and center, and maybe disconnect with the KPIs and being all worried about getting hired and things of that nature. If you come from a place of service and you come from a place of sharing what you're up to and why you're so passionate about the area of law and the difference that you can make, and the rest will come.
Absolutely. And I think, in the same way that we would choose anything to do with our time, it's also important to be sort of discerning about where you think you can make the greatest impact or what draws you. I know that I've been on plenty of boards, and probably a lot of us have, where you're like, are we meeting and talking about the same thing over and over? I think it's great. The more, kind of hands-on access that you actually get to people, the more that you have that real impact, or being able to, co-counsel with somebody else or do an amicus brief or whatever to produce something concrete is really wonderful. And even if that's simply tabling at a church, or whatever, but really being able to connect with people, I think is important. Sometimes that may be supporting an organization that you believe in. But, again, it doesn't mean just volunteering wherever or putting your time out wherever. There are plenty of dysfunctional organizations that maybe aren't the best time investment either.
And that's what I was going to ask. How do you discern that and figure out where there's one thing to be out there and volunteering? I see people all the time, they're spending time everywhere because they are so heart-centered, but it's not a phenomenal organization, right? You're not seeing any return on investment or opportunity. It might not be the right pond for you to be playing in or volunteering in or spending your time. So how do you have a process that you put yourself through in regards to measuring what's a good use of your time and service?
I think, I always appreciate the opportunity to do direct service. So like, I really do like legal affairs or that sort of thing. It's also nice to know what type of commitment you're getting into. So before anything, I mean, if you're feeling overwhelmed, part of it is just simple time management. You have to be able to look at how much time you have, how much time you're able to give, and then be very clear with whatever thing you're committing to, knowing what you're getting into. And if a board or an organization is not able to clearly articulate that to you, I think that's a red flag.
Mm-hmm.
You should know, how much time you're expected to commit and what type of activities you're going to be involved with. It's okay to interview back if you're offered, to serve in some way, to know what you're getting into. If you don't have a large time, or you still are feeling very crunched with time and you're not sure how to do something, being able to dip your toe in by doing something that's a one-time event, or taking one case or what have you, I think is a good way to kind of get the ball rolling. And then you can decide, how much time you do have to commit in maybe a more ongoing capacity.
And how do you, when you're out there and you're volunteering and you're sharing the joy of what you get to do every day, how do you ask for referrals? Can you tell us a little bit about how you know your time out there is effective, and if you have a process where you do end and ask for referrals, or at least give them a nugget of how to work with you?
Well, I mean, I definitely always communicate where everyone can find me. That's for sure. And, with even at like legal affairs, I will, provide my card. Sometimes I'll provide quotes if somebody wants ongoing representation, which does happen. We track referral sources at my office, just for the business side of things. Again, being heart-centered, of course, doesn't mean you can't be a smart business person. Still having your metrics and knowing whether or not that type of investment does have payoff, you can tell by tracking your referrals and tracking your sources in the future. But I found that there's some areas that, although we've volunteered and put time into it, they haven't resulted as much in directly to cases that we can identify. There may be other reasons for working with them. But, it's interesting is that I remember one meeting in particular where it was a whole bunch of attorneys and we were interfacing with the government and brainstorming about, some new thing coming down the pipe for immigration. Happens all the time. And there was a number of attorneys at the table, and one in particular who kept saying, but how is this going to benefit me? What am I going to get out of this? And I could see the body language of everybody around the table being like, kind of shocked by that. And I think there's a balance of being able to make yourself available and being clear that you're open for business without, blatantly grasping for additional business. There needs to be part of it needs to be able to, being able to release it kind of into the universe and allow things to return to you without being solely focused on yourself, because then it's completely defeatist, I think.
Yeah, and that's how you really show up, authentic and not as, but that stereotypical attorney, what's in it for me, way back when in the late 90s and 2000, that was the whole message of where's the WIFM? Where's the WIFM? And the WIFM is by just showing up and over communicating and over delivering value.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, I know where I would like to take my business at this point. And so I know that the target markets that I have, for example, I know that I'm in love with Santa Fe. I'm in love with the artists there. And we have a great film industry in New Mexico, which is a whole different area of immigration law. And just really being able to say that to people. And I continue to message it because it's on my mind and because I'm really excited about it. So it's already generated some leads in that capacity. I'm also pro bono attorney for the Santa Fe International Folk Art Market, which is this really wonderful market that brings in, artists from all over the world, hundreds of artists. And so, it's a combination of plugging in and just being able to speak, knowing where you want to go, being able to take the time for yourself to really figure out where it is that you want to grow business, and then, speaking your truth and showing up.
And you're passionate about it, right? So you can, it came right through. Your energy went up, and your whole persona changed when you started speaking about the artist community, the film industry, and you're passionate about it. There's no question. And that's alignment right there of figuring out things that you are really excited about, you're passionate about, you can speak into, you can banter back and forth with the ideal client, the existing clients, the people in the community, and that'll come through. And that is how you outshine the bigger firms or your competition or what have you, because you're in the community, you're speaking the same language, and you're passionate about it. You're not just a talking head.
Absolutely. I mean, we have a larger firm in town that's kind of a branch office of another firm. And, I'm interested in speaking with attorneys sometimes that work at a place. Again, it's obvious when you're working for something as a job versus as a career or as a path that you feel strongly about.
So when you started out, I'm sure that almost all of your time was spent in regards to connection and community and volunteering and putting all that time in early on. How long have you been in practice now?
13 years.
Wow. I would assert that putting the work in and showing up early on, then now it's shifted for you, and you get to be very selective and pick and choose where you spend your time.
Yes, I mean, things definitely have shifted. The longer term commitment stuff, I like being on a board or knowing that, you have to have regular meetings or whatever. I did thankfully go on to have a couple of kids. And so they're still quite young and in elementary school. So there's requirements there to be able to show up for them. So the more limited, plugging in periods like the opportunity to volunteer with the kids that I mentioned, those are things that fit more appropriately with my schedule. I can pick my speaking engagements with, at different locations depending on how it fits with my current goals. But I also encourage not only my associate attorneys, but all of my staff to get involved with the community as well. I mean, I just had one of my legal assistants went and attended a book signing for a wonderful author out of Denver's Sturm College of Law, because she's really passionate about immigration. And he was speaking about issues surrounding immigration detention. So, I think it's important that it's reflected across the board. So it's not, the firm at this point is not just me. It's everybody that works here. We're a team. And so that's part of not only what I encourage people to do, but for our attorneys, I also require that they give back to a certain extent wherever they choose to do so, because it's reflecting that in a greater capacity. It should always be bigger than ourselves.
And what I'm picking up, so from your hiring process, it's something that you communicate right off the bat. They have to come from a place of service and being a go-giver right off the bat, and have a passion for it versus saying, yeah, I'll check the box. This is what you quote unquote have to do to work here, but it's something that they view as they get to do.
Yes, it's one of those things that when we screen people, when we're going through the interview process, I want to see a greater commitment to the field. I need to see a passion. And in fact, whenever we do what we call our development meetings with our staff, which is a form of a performance review, but it's really more forward looking. We look at, how is your passion for immigrants reflected in your work? How are you demonstrating that? Because it's really important it's just as important as anything else, because if you're really committed to it and it's part of what you believe, then your work will be better and you'll have a better work experience and lift up those around you as well.
Love a development. That's fantastic. It's from a place of growth and passion versus evaluation and review.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much you can do. I think it's a Thoreau quote that only the day dawns to which you are awake. You really only have today to work with. So you can reflect on the past, but it's really forward looking. I think the thing that staff dreads more than anything is being reviewed, kind of having that steamroller go over over your last 6 months of your life or whatever. But looking at what do you need moving forward? What draws you? Where do you want to go? Is always inspiring when you think about the potential of what's next.
You're saying, Rebecca, I can't help but really shine a flashlight on this. You've used what you have to put it out to the universe and trust it. You've used spirit. You've used trust the process. Your mindset around your team, developing your team. I have to imagine the greatest piece to your success when you were starting out, leaving a law practice, 4 months pregnant, knowing that eventually you were going to have to deliver the baby and take some time off, knowing that you were going to grow a family, being a mom, managing a family and running a business and growing a business. And the biggest piece to your success I'm hearing is your energy and your mindset that you bring to it versus a place of this has to work and white knuckling it and just having a tremendous amount of stress and anxiety around it to this. I'm just picking up on this unwavering faith and connection to your purpose and your why of what you're doing, and just showing up from that place and just trusting that the rest of it, whatever is supposed to come your way, will come your way and it'll work out.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to have faith that you're on the right path, and that things will work out. I refuse to accept that, anything has to follow a particular fateful path. I mean, even with having my first daughter, I mean, I ended up having a C-section. It's not what I had anticipated. I know that there was a conversation with my husband at one point where I was just like, I can't take off the time for this, and they're like, well, we're going to take the baby out regardless. So get used to the idea, but again, you roll with it. And that's what we did. And I brought the baby into work. I was like, I'm going to breastfeed. I've got a hooter hider, sort of like an apron. And I'm like, I'm going to nurse through consultations. I'm going to do this. The baby's underneath the desk for chunks of time. And if a client wasn't comfortable with that, well, that's who I was, and so at that point, maybe I wasn't the best fit for them. There's always plenty of work out there. I really believe that no matter what kind of area of law that you're in, it's just a matter of accessing it in a way that works for you. And I did it with my second child as well. And there was never an issue. There were plenty of days that things were crazy. I got some really funny stories about either pumping through telephonic hearings or doing things that were crazy, in order to make it work. It wasn't easy by any stretch of the imagination, but it works. And in the end, you can still do it, I think.
Yes. And there's always plenty of work out there, and being who you are and being vulnerable and raw and real. So many law firms that when I speak to the owner, whether their employees have children, they have children, that they bring them, and the client, who doesn't love babies and puppies? Everybody does. And you're showing them that you're real, even if you're having a crazy, chaotic meltdown day and you have clients in there. They're like, oh my goodness, let me hold the baby. Or they come in just to see the puppy. I hear that all the time. So when you build a practice around who you are and you're unapologetic about it, you will attract the right clients. And that mindset that you adopted so early on, the baby's coming to work with me, I'm pumping. It's, this is who I am. And it just even communicates how powerful you are and how much you will fight for your clients, because your willingness to show up and not, just stop because you had a baby or stop because this crisis or what have you. It just communicates them how passionate you are.
Absolutely. And I think, treating staff in the same way that you would yourself as well. I mean, I just had one of my legal assistants has been struggling with fertility. She has shared that with me, which makes me profoundly happy that she would share that with me or feel comfortable doing that of her own accord. And she just had a positive pregnancy test, and she was able to run into my office and tell me, because she knows that I'm going to support her throughout the process. She doesn't have to be worried or concerned. She doesn't have to wait to figure out what the right moment is. It's a welcoming enough environment that she's able to share. That makes me really proud of who we are, because I know I didn't have that experience. It was something that was really concerning to me. You're not sure what the reaction is going to be. And sure, there's an impact, of course there is, but there's always ways through. And knowing that you're supportive means that, we can, now I have her entire pregnancy to plan for it because she's been open with me. All good things.
Excellent. Excellent. So what parting advice would you give to our listeners here, attorneys and or support staff that are supporting an attorney that just hung their shingle, or maybe they're dealing with lead generation, how to get out there, how to get their message, how to fight through the noise, how to compete with big firms? What parting words would you leave for our listeners in regards to how to adopt this unwavering faith? Number one, staying in your own lane and getting anchoring really clear into who you are and what type of clients you want to serve in, and how they can keep that alive every day and not get defeated.
I think that, it's interesting because it's very timely right now, is that knowing that it's imperative to take the time to think, to take the time to figure out your own path. And that's not something that you can do between consultations or, only on Saturday, for an hour or whatever. It needs to be, you really need to be able to take a personal day or take a weekend or a long weekend or what have you, to really allow yourself to relax and let the creative juices flow and figure out where you want to go, the big picture questions. Because without that, you can't inform the rest of it. And if, there was an analogy that my dad actually told me about when I was talking about my business. And he said, if you're walking down a road, most of the time there's a house on fire on one side and there's a house under construction on the other side of the road. And you're always going to run to the house on fire. You're never going to build anything if all you're doing is putting out fires. You really have to be able to take the time to consciously turn your back on the fire and put some effort into building the house, knowing where you're going, where your passion lies, and then the rest of it will flow from there.
Oh, I love that analogy. That is wonderful. The power of the pause I always speak about. This is, like you said, it's so timely to just relax and allow the creative juices to flow and get really clear on what you want, what you don't want, what you want to build, what brings you joy, and put your 80% there. And if what you're currently doing is not feeding you spiritually, emotionally, from a place of fulfillment, but it's paying the bills, you continue to figure out how you can streamline that out, how you can pare that down. And I just love that analogy of really, this is such an opportune time right now to get really, really clear. And I think it's no mistake sometimes that the universe hands us these forced times to relax and allow the creative juices to flow, sometimes out of necessity, but nonetheless seize the day with it, right?
Absolutely.
Well, great. Thank you so much. You have created so many amazing value bombs here for our listeners. And I know that I feel just completely honored and inspired to hear your story. You're so clear in your tonality and your message, and your energy just comes through in regards to how committed you are to what you're doing and how you're doing it versus following the lead of other attorneys and law firms out there. And that is infectious for your clients. So if you're not excited and inspired and empowered and really, really deeply rooted in what you're doing and how you're doing it, I love this advice here, Rebecca. Take this time to relax and power down and realign and get really clear on that. And then just constantly giving of your time and showing up. And it's just amazing of what a business you have created from that place versus just pivoting to whatever else everyone's telling you need to do from a business perspective of the KPIs, ROIs, the WIFMs, et cetera. Just tune out that noise and stay in your own lane.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you can, I mean, it's always good to still have metrics and to have the, the business side of things too, but I think it just needs to be secondary.
Yes. Okay, well, I think this is a great stopping point for us. I'm going to go ahead and put in the show notes a link to your website so our visitors and our listeners can take a look at your amazing website that I think just emulates so much of who you are, and it over communicates your purpose and your passion. And I think it's just a wonderful way. Also, if you're in the immigration space and you're in the New Mexico area, by all means, send your clients and your referrals to Rebecca. She has just such an amazing business model. And of course, if you need her for any speaking engagements, clearly you're very, 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 very passionate about what you do. And I cannot thank you enough for being our guest today.
Absolutely, Molly. Thank you so much.
Yes. Okay, listeners, until next time, we will have all the good notes in here, the talking points, as well as a way to connect with Rebecca here at the bottom of the show notes.